Happy birthday, LivingFelt, for 20 years in business. I'm Patti Barker, and today, as a birthday gift, I'm giving this Leaf Boa Nuno Scarf in celebration. So when I was first discovering ways to showcase the fabrics in my Nuno Felt, I developed the mosaic Nuno Felt techniques. And along the way, when I was putting a little strip of wool in the center of them, I decided they looked sort of like leaves. So the mosaics led to the stained glass, which led to the leaves. And that's sometimes how it works with creativity. I really love the way that this scarf wears and drapes. It's so much fun to wear. It's fun to play with. You get lots of comments about it when you wear them. And any colors you can imagine. It doesn't have to be leaf colors. It's so much fun. The materials we need for the Leaf Boa Scarf are approximately 26 pieces of silk gauze, approximately 4 by 5 inches. I like the hand painted with different colors in there. 2 ounces of merino top, and about a ½ ounce of viscose or silk top fibers. Check out the handout in the link below for detailed instructions for this class. In this class, we're working with these beautiful blue and purple tones, but quite often I like to work with hand-painted roving as well, so you get different colors throughout your lines of wool. So if you're working in a solid color merino like we did on this class, you may want to break that up. If you can see on the back, it's not as interesting. That's why we use the viscose on top to give it a little bit more interest in the wool. I actually discovered that when you put a little bit of roving partway through the diamond-shaped silk, it crinkled around it and caused it to look sort of like a leaf. So that's what gave me the idea to do this, and I started laying the squares diamond way all the way down the center, and then I realized if I could bring the leaves off the sides of the diamonds, that is what creates this really fun, what I call boa leaf scarf. So we just went over the materials, so let's talk a little bit about your setup. I like to work with a rubber rug mat with a sheer piece of painter's drop cloth plastic on top and another piece of plastic the same size to sandwich the project in between. But if you don't have the rubber rug mat, you can certainly work with bubble wrap for this. I'm working on a 76-inch table, so you do need a long surface. So if you happen to be working on a table that's not quite long enough for your project, you can check out Marie's tutorial on how to roll and scroll on YouTube. To lay out this boa scarf, we're going to begin with silk gauze that has been hand painted. If you're not sure how to dye the silks in the microwave, you can refer to Marie's tutorial on how to do that. I cut these squares that are about 4 by 5 inches, and I'm laying them down in a diamond pattern down the center of my table. And then I'm placing wool around the edge of each piece and flipping it over and doing wool around the edge on both sides of it. Then I come back and create a leaf that's attached to the side, one on each side of each of these center diamonds. And you can see that they fit just right on the mat. So I've done that all the way down the center, and then I laid one piece of roving all the way down the center for the structure, and it also ends up being the main vein for the leaves at the very ends. So as I'm laying these out, I'm putting these leaves toward this end of the scarf. And when I get to the very center, I've gotten to the 5th diamond on this end, and I actually have 10 of them. I switch direction and start laying them toward this end of the scarf. So this is the very center of the scarf. And I've put 4 on each side, this half of the scarf, and then 4 on each side of this half of the scarf. I'm laying ultra thin strips of this visco top on top of this purple merino wool just to give it a little extra added sheen. So it's quite a simple process, a little bit tedious, but once the layout is complete, it's ready to wet and to start felting. When I'm wetting it, I want to make sure this leaf isn't going to connect to this leaf where I don't want it to. So I actually lift it slightly and tuck the edge under. You want to make sure any place they're connected, here, here, and here, that it's a nice strong connection. You don't want any wimpy just threads there. That's why they're overlapped. This corner of this one's overlapped over this one. Okay, so I'm just lifting it and kind of tucking it under slightly. It just cleans up the edges. So it's just a kind of a quick lift and sort of flip that edge under all 4 sides of each one of these, and then that point, I'm going to twist it a little bit, make sure it's not grabbing anything else. Covering it with plastic, pressing, make sure everything is wet. If I was using a sander, this is where I would sand it. Because this is silk gauze we're working with, it should felt relatively quickly compared to other fabrics. And you roll it up. I'm lifting it. In case I have too much water, it's not going to shove the design. The water's going to roll out. Rolling it in midair, setting it down. Getting some leakage. Oh, over here too. So this is wet and it's all rolled up. I'm going to put these ties on it and I'm going to roll it about 50 times in the middle, 50 times on the ends, unroll it, roll it back up again, 50 times in the middle, 50 times on the ends. And that is what I call one set. I may have to do a second set. We'll just see how well the wool grabs this silk gauze. So I'm going to roll it up in what I call the burrito, tuck the ends, and then wrist to elbow. Let's see what happens. Got a nice bit of soap suds going on. I'm going to take this noodle down here so I don't forget where it goes. I'm going to peel back this top layer of plastic just so I can tweak a few things before I roll it back up. So I'm looking for stray fibers that are trying to connect where they shouldn't. I'm going to tuck those under. Anything off the edge needs to come back onto the mat. This one came way off. It's really important this first time to do this because things can get out of whack sometimes, especially when there's a lot of water. And once it starts felting really well, you don't get a lot of chance to fix things. So this is when you want to do it. Twist the ends. So if you do find yourself with some of these leaves that are running into the others and touching, and the fibers kind of reach out and connect, this is a good time to pull them apart, tuck under any rough edges, straighten out any folds you might find. This is when you want to do it. I think that looks pretty good. So I'm not going to use the top plastic again. It was just where we initially had wet it, and I wanted to make sure it helped me to press everything. So now I'm just going to roll this back up. Things are starting to hang on, but they definitely need more work, so here we go. You want to make sure your roll is snug. If it's too loose, things get folding up around inside, folding up onto each other. So you want to roll it tight and tie it nice and snug. These are t-shirt strips I'm using. About a 2-inch strip makes a nice tie. Okay, another 50 in the middle and 50 on the end. Just 50 more. All right, let's see what happened. This is what I love about making felt, the surprises. Okay, looking pretty good. Unroll it carefully because if it sticks to the roll, it's going to end up underneath your package. Oh, it's looking pretty good. I think it's starting to hold together pretty well, but I would like to roll it one more session without the plastic underneath it. And the way to remove this bottom plastic without disturbing anything is I just make great big folds in it. Just gently roll it up until you get almost to the other end. I'm going to pick it up, put it face down on this end, and then kind of reach under there and unroll it sort of upside down, if you will. It tends to stick to the plastic, so you are able to reposition it a little bit without messing anything up. And now we're going to be looking at the bottom side of our layout. Now we can remove the plastic once and for all. I do reuse these plastics quite a bit. I rinse them in the shower and hang them on the shower rod. I happen to have a bathroom in my studio that I don't really shower in, so that's where the plastics live. Okay. It feels pretty good, but it's still a little mushy. And what I'm looking at is I'm picking it up and I'm feeling the wool on both sides. And if the wool still wiggles under my fingers, then it's not felted enough for the next step. So I'm going to actually roll this a little bit more, one more set. In other words, 50-50 from each end, and then I think we'll be ready at that point to go to the next stage. Here we go. I'm actually using more pressure this time. The outside. And 50. Whew. All right, I think I might need to do one more on the other end, finish the set, but let's take a look first. Oh yeah, I think I can hear it. It makes a little whook sound. Hear that sound? That means it's been felting. Yeah, very, very close. One more session, one more time, and I think we'll be ready to go to the fulling stage. It's starting to dry out a little bit too, but that's okay. It's definitely still damp enough to finish the process. All right, now the outside, and that should be all the rolling I need to do. Okay, I'm pretty sure it's ready, but let's just double check. Nice. Here's how we're going to check. Gonna feel that again. Oh yes. So what you want it to feel like is a wet suede. In other words, the fibers aren't really wiggling hardly at all. If they are a little bit, it's okay, because we're going to finish that, firm it up in the next step, which is the fulling stage. The fulling stage is where all the shrinkage happens. We're actually compacting the wool strongly so that it's going to be a nice firm felt and not, come apart over the time, over wearing. Because this is kind of a floppy scarf, we don't want it to come apart on us, so it's going to get a lot of movement. The final stage of the fulling for this leaf scarf, leaf boa I call it, is we're going to take one half over to the other half, kind of line them up a little bit, doesn't have to be perfect, and then one more time, and then I'm going to roll it this way. This is so that I can roll it in my hands easily, and I'm putting a lot of pressure on it, as much strength as I can. And I'm only doing it about 5 or 6 rolls and moving on. and then back the other way. And then I'm going to undo it, sort of drop it a little. And I like to go back and forth between dropping it and rolling it in my hands. So again, it's holding together, but it needs more compacting to really finish it. If it's dried out at this stage, go ahead and add a little bit more water. And I think this one is getting a little dry, so I'm going to give it a little spritz of water just to give it a little more something to work with. I'm going to alternate between rolling in my hands and dropping it for about 5 minutes. I want to see that the wool is nice and firm. I can see that it needs a little more work, so I'm going to keep working this piece. What I'm looking for is I want the wool to feel firm around the edges of the leaf. Of course, the fabric will still be the fabric, but the wool needs to be a solid network of wool, and that's what we're doing here. We're compacting it. The tossing kind of shocks the fibers into going whoop and grabbing on a little better. Okay, let's see how it feels now. Stretching is also part of fulling, so it's a good idea to stretch some of that wool a little bit. And I can see from stretching it that there still are some areas that aren't as firm as I'd like to see them. So I'm going to keep working it, but before I do, I'm going to kind of put it back in the shape I intended it by stretching a little bit. This is a stage, if you want to move things along a little quicker, you can add some warm water to it. I don't ever really use hot water when I'm felting with fabrics. I want to make sure that wool is grabbed onto the fabric really firmly before it ever felts to itself. Sometimes hot water makes the wool hang on to its buddies, the other fibers of wool, and ignore the fabric. So it is felted far enough along here that we can add warm water if you like. But I'm just going to keep working it, stretching, rolling it onto itself. Take this side down to this side again. It's close. This time I'm going to bring these leaves over to these leaves and roll it this way. So all my leaves are going in the same direction. I'm going to start here, work my way down to the tips. This stage is called rolling it onto itself. And before I learned this, I was just doing the tossing, and the final fulling was sort of uneven. You know, it would be only the parts that would hit the table a lot that would get fulling. Once I started rolling it onto itself, the quality of my work improved a great deal. I do try to land it somewhere different each time. And I'm going to smooth it out again and stretch those ends. See how it looks. Getting really close. Yeah, that feels pretty good. Let's see if they all feel good. If you have an area that is not felting very well when everything else seems to be, you can use a hand tool. There's all kinds of things you can use. Anything that has a ridge, Some people use you remember the old Tupperware water pitcher lids that have ridges on them? I've seen people use those, or honey dippers, anything that has ridges on it. You can rub on the wool to make it firm. Again, I'm smoothing it back out. I'm feeling how well the wool is felted. I'm sort of checking it at the same time to see if there's an area that needs a little more work. Now, this end, for some reason, isn't felted as well as the other end. Maybe I didn't roll as hard when I was doing that part. I'm going to give it a little bit of extra water and work this end a little bit more. Might as well start incorporating some of these too. Keep on going. Doesn't really matter how you bunch it up, just make sure you're rolling it onto itself. Ooh, there's some suds in there. See how it feels now. If you look at these tips, there can be little sort of balls at the end, or this one's really long and wispy, so I like to trim those down just a slight bit. So I like to trim them down closer to the leaf. It's the sign of a finely finished piece. I cut them at an angle. There you go, just a few. Let's see some of these others. And I'm cutting them at an angle. I'm leaving, quite a bit of tip on there, but I'm cutting off I call them goobers, but they're just really oddly uneven tips. So I'm going to actually go over the whole piece and do that while I'm pressing it. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and soak this in some vinegar water. We have rolled it, we have folded, we've rolled it onto itself, and now it's time. We're going to soak it in about a gallon of water. I'm going to add what I call the 3 glug method. 1, 2, 3 glugs. So roughly 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. This will neutralize all of that soap. We do want to soak it for a good 10 minutes. Make sure it's in there really well. 10 minutes has passed, so we're going to go ahead and take our scarf out of that water. Squeeze a little bit excess out of there. And then you can spin it if you have a spinner, or the spin cycle alone on your washer. Make sure you don't agitate it any further. It'll shrink it up too much. And then while it's still damp, you can press it with a regular iron, or like I said, if you want to hang it to dry, you can press it anytime, but do come back and press it. Otherwise, your leaves are going to be all wrinkly and wonky. And once you press it, it looks so much better. So this is pretty damp, so I'm just going to hit it with this iron, and you can hear the sizzle going on. But it's laying things down beautifully. And the heat actually helps kind of steam it with that dampness. Now while I have it on here, it's a good time to touch up those tips. Some of them along the way I have trimmed, but I'm just going to trim the ones as I press them. That one looks pretty good. Now this is a stage where people will say to me, can I trim, if I don't like the shape of things, can I trim into the wool? I don't usually like to trim into the wool unless you're going to spend time kind of rolling it, but here's something I can show you. So right here, there's like a little, the edge isn't smooth, but see that little part sticking out? You can stretch the part that's skinny next to it, and then you can take the part sticking out and roll it between your 2 fingers. And it will shrink in the direction in which you roll it. Okay? So instead of cutting that little guy off, you just roll it for a while, and a lot of it goes away. Okay? Same thing with these points. If the points bother you, you can stretch them and roll the actual point until your leaf has a curved edge. Here's another example. See how it's kind of pointed? Well, if you stretch it while it's still damp and roll that point between your fingers, you can roll it for a little while, it shrinks and it gives you a nice finished edge. So here's our completed leaf boa. What I really love about this is the very sheer silks. And I'm looking it over and seeing that everything felted real well. My tips have been trimmed nicely. You can see a couple of different shades of silk that I used. I interspersed them in with the blue here and there just to create more interest. But I really love, you can see here's the very center where the leaves go the different direction. And I just really love how it turned out. I really love the way these wear. They're super fun and you get lots of compliments on them. If you had fun creating your boa scarf, we'll be launching a new tutorial very soon called Collage Nuno Felt Scarf, where you'll learn all types of new techniques for your felting toolbox. In the Collage Nuno Scarf class, we'll be exploring all types of things, different ways of using resists, recycled fabrics, and some tips about picking the right ones. We'll be working with sari silks from the Sari Party Pack and some other silks as well. And I'll be sharing different ways of working with those fabrics. So I hope to see you there. Once again, happy birthday, LivingFelt.